I'm Allie, a test prep tutor and strategist at Geek. Have you ever seen an ACT English or SAT writing question where you swear more than one answer choice is grammatically correct? How do you choose between them? Both the SAT and ACT value clear and concise writing. And you can think about this as the golden rule for the SAT writing and ACT English sections. When you have two or more answer choices that are both technically grammatically correct, you can choose between them by focusing on this golden rule. Which answer choice is more clear and more concise? While many people think that the SAT and ACT value fluffy or fancy language on these English and writing sections, it's actually the exact opposite. They really value being clear and concise. So what does this actually mean? Being clear means articulating your point accurately and without confusion. Being concise means articulating your point with as few words as possible. So when we think about being clear and concise, we want to say what we're trying to say in a way that is not confusing in as few words as possible. So the name of the game on these sections is to make sure that your answer choice is first grammatically correct. It has to be grammatically correct for it to be the right answer. Then you want to make sure that it is indeed actually clear and concise. And if it's not clear and concise, is there another answer choice that's also grammatically correct that might be a bit more clear or a bit more concise? This overarching idea of focusing on clear and concise writing can be found throughout the English and writing sections. It's really something you should be thinking about on all questions. But the SAT and ACT both have their own way of identifying how this can be tested on its own. So for the SAT, it's called Wordiness, and for the ACT, it's called Redundancy. But these two concepts are essentially the same thing. What they're trying to test is that you understand how to write clearly and concisely. They don't want you to be redundant, they don't want you to repeat yourself, and they don't want you to be too wordy, using too many words to basically say something that could be said in fewer words. So let's look at a few practice problems together. So here we're saying two, and we're also saying twins. Well, whenever we have twins, we have two of them, right? We don't actually need to say two twins. We can just say twins. So we can actually just remove that two, and we're saying the same thing, but with fewer words. I repeated myself again. Okay, so when you repeat yourself, you have to be saying the same thing again. So we don't need to say, I repeated myself again. We can just say, I repeated myself. And some of this is a little bit tricky or not very intuitive because we oftentimes are redundant when we are speaking just casually to friends or family. And so it's something that you are going to have to watch for to make sure that you aren't accidentally being redundant on the test. Now let's look at a couple real practice test examples. Francesca likes tacos, but sometimes she thinks they're too spicy and wishes they had less seasoning. Okay, so our underlined portion is everything after the comma. So this is what we have the opportunity to change. So on this question, first of all, we'd want to make sure that there's nothing grammatically incorrect. And then we want to look and see what is least redundant or least wordy. So let's focus on that here. But sometimes she thinks they're too spicy and wishes they had less seasoning. So there's nothing technically grammatically incorrect here, but we are using a lot of words. When you read this, can you think of anything that you might be able to take out? Maybe something that's being a little bit repetitive? Well, if we think that something's too spicy, we probably don't need to say that we wish it had less seasoning, because that's essentially one and the same. So let's look at our other options. B, but she wishes they had less seasoning on them because she doesn't like spicy food. So again, kind of saying the same thing, but we're not actually reducing the length of the sentence. So we're going to cross that one out. C, but sometimes they're too spicy for her taste. Okay, that sounds pretty good, right? And then D, but sometimes she doesn't care for the seasoning because it's too spicy. So we actually have a couple issues here. One would be that we have this capitalization that doesn't really belong. And then we also have some redundancy. So A, B, and D all kind of have the issue of being redundant, whereas C is accomplishing the same thing. We're actually able to communicate to the reader the same idea, that she likes tacos, but she doesn't want them to be too spicy. But we're saying it in a lot fewer words. So that's going to be our answer here, C. Carla is always adding additional items to her shopping cart to get free shipping. So when you think about this part that's underlined, is there anything that is repetitive or redundant? Carla is always adding additional items. So if you're adding something, it's additional. Or if you describe something as additional, you know you have to add it. So you don't need to say adding additional. So let's see if there's any answer choices that might be a little less redundant. Carla always adds items to her shopping cart to get free shipping. Carla frequently adds extra things. Carla pays more for additional items added. So D is going to be very repetitive again. It's kind of the same thing as A. C is a little tricky because it's repetitive, but it's in a different way. Carla frequently adds extra things. So extra and adds, again, kind of the same thing. So B is going to be our best option because it's the least repetitive. Redundancy and wordiness questions are all about leaning into this golden rule of the SAT writing and ACT English sections. You want to focus on clear and concise writing. You can always ask yourself, is there something that I could remove and still say the same thing? If so, you want to remove that thing. Don't try to make things more complicated than they need to be. These tests really value being clear and concise, so focus on that if nothing else. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like content like this, make sure you subscribe, and you can also find us at testgeek.com/blog.